This is a Best in Climate episode of Earth Feels, where each week your hosts Rose and Christine read to you from some of the best climate-related blogs and articles on the web.
Hey there, it's Rose. This week's Best in Climate comes to us from climatetracker.org, an international nonprofit organization aiming to support, train, and incentivize better climate journalism globally. They believe in the power of journalism, but recognize that many young journalists don't have the training, resources, or support to identify and tell the climate stories that they want to. And they recognize that this challenge is often greatest in the countries hit hardest by climate change. And again, as in previous episodes, this story is republished here as a part of Covering Climate Now, a global journalism collaboration strengthening coverage of the climate story. It does feel important to note that the greatest action you can take on climate change is to talk about it. And today's article is a hopeful one. It's entitled, "This Kenyan Village Halted Deforestation by Selling Carbon Credits." And it's written by Cici Siago. If he was working a few years ago, 36-year-old Bomani Mohammed would be cutting Kenya's mangroves and selling them for charcoal or timber. Instead, he earns a living by growing them. This resident of Gasi Bay, located on Kenya's eastern African coast, is optimistic about the future. He and more than 3,000 neighbors have stopped logging mangroves in a moment when their village is at risk of being submerged due to rising seawater levels. Since the inception of a community project known as Mikoko Pamoja, a Swahili word for mangroves together, Mohammed has benefited through various initiatives of reforestation, making him change his perception about mangrove trees. He is one of the people in Kenya benefiting from the rising market of carbon credits. This means international clients, often companies, can pay to compensate for their greenhouse gas emissions. They pay to restore mangrove forests, which are known to store a lot of carbon, and then count it as a compensation for their emissions. Every month, Mohammed and members of his community voluntarily take part in mangrove planting activities. Just recently, as the world marked International Day for Conservation of Mangroves, they planted over 5,000 mangrove seedlings in Gasi Bay, together with various other Kenyan government officials. Quote, "Previously we would have cut the mangroves, but a lot of soil used to be washed into the water, affecting our fishing activities. These affected their breeding areas and fish stock for fishermen, who are the majority of my community," he said. Carbon markets are essential for reducing emissions, as well as providing sustainable jobs in developing countries like Kenya. In fact, half of the world's countries, accounting for 38% of emissions, included markets in their national climate plans. But if they are not strictly regulated, they can lead to more harm than good. They would allow to a double counting of emissions, both for the country where mangroves were planted and for the country who paid for them. Because of this, it's one of the most controversial issues pending in the UN's climate negotiations, which are yet to produce a rulebook for the Paris Agreement. This rulebook would also regulate carbon markets. Restoring mangroves for money. Mohammed said, due to limited job opportunities as a result of low education levels, most of the residents of Gasi Bay rely on fishing as the main economic activity, and they used to complement it with the sale of charcoal and logging. According to him, interventions by Mikoko Pamoja, a now community-led organization in Kenya, has helped the community to instead focus on conservation of the mangroves. They have also been educated on the importance of conserving the environment. Quote, All the children can go to school because, through the proceeds of the trade, we have been funded to repair the roofs of schools where classes were worn out. All villagers now have access to piped water, and the children are provided with balls to play with, he said. According to Rama Rajid Kivugo, the project coordinator in the community, the initiative came up in 2012 as an intervention to a high rate of mangrove exploitation that used to happen in the area. This is a community-run project and a public initiative, which other communities have also replicated. A similar project, Vanga Blue Forest Project, is also trading carbon credits from mangrove conservation and restoration in Vanga, an area on the Kenyan coast in Vanga village, 72 kilometers from Gazi. Communities here are benefiting from the trade of carbon credits. Quote, at that time, the impacts of climate change were already being felt globally. In this community, they had started getting reduced fish stocks as the waters had risen, and these mangroves could no longer offer breeding and protective grounds for fish, she explained. The trade is not only to help the community economically, but also to shield them from the harsh effects of climate change. By working under a voluntary carbon market, the trade is not limited to countries, and its prices, too, are not fixed. This has also allowed the carbon to be sold through individuals, companies, across the globe, with the majority of the countries being in the global north. Quote, a few businesses from Kenya have started engaging us, and I think this is a good sign in national efforts to offset carbon as well as to support local community efforts, she said. Despite the project being a success, they are still faced with challenges, such as continued deforestation, according to Ms. Rashid, which she said was due to the absence of a boundary along the area where the mangrove is planted. But the volatility of the carbon market has posed a major challenge because the carbon prices keep fluctuating depending on the aspect of demand and supply. In short, when the demand is low, the prices are also low. It has also proven grim to meet the technical requirements, such as ecosystem restoration, because of the unavailability of required seedlings. Rashid said that every year they are required to plant at least 4,000 seedlings in a 0.4 hectare of land, but the seedlings are not always available. Climate change has also posed a steep challenge, and this has made the project miss some of the percentage of revenue targeted. But despite the challenges, Rashid said the project has earned a good income for local communities, which is currently being invested in different minor projects in the small community. This amount has been increasing for the past 3 years. By the end of 2020, they registered the equivalent of $25,000 US in carbon credits sold, an amount that has been used to ensure that most of the basic needs of the locals are met through the various sponsored initiatives. This includes buying textbooks for school children, repairing worn-out iron sheets, setting up clean water points after digging wells close to people's houses, and buying playing kits and balls for the kids. So how do they get the money? According to Ms. Rashid, the generated credits are sold in the following year after approval reports. The time to approve and sell the credits varies and can take weeks depending on how the reports are made. They are then marketed by the Association of Coastal Ecosystem Services, a Scotland-based charity organization that also handles the trade of credits. Afterwards, buyers are issued with certificates once the trade is complete to acknowledge receipt. Dr. James Kairu, a senior Kenyan scientist working with the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, who is also the brains behind the Makoko Pamoja project, said that Kenya, as a developing country, contributes little to global emissions, but was one of the most affected by climate change. Dr. Kairu said it was important to have mitigations such as planting mangroves and restoring the forest to protect Kenya against the harsh effects of climate change that it is facing due to carbon emissions. He will be among Kenyans representing the country in the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow this November. There, countries will try to agree on the fate of the carbon markets and their regulations. For Mohammed, he believes his 2-month-old child will have a better future, not only in access to books and water in the area, but also in a clean environment as he aims toward planting more mangroves in Ghazi. So there you have it. One organization using ingenuity and an economic model to create solution. And it's not surprising to hear that local communities in Kenya are already feeling the effects of climate change, though they add little to the emissions problem. Again, the best thing you can do in the effort to counteract climate change is to talk about it with everyone you know. I'm encouraged to see organizations like climatetracker.org and Covering Climate Now bolstering reporting on this important issue. The more the media can be involved, the more people will hear about it and talk about it. It needs to be everywhere right now in order for us to take the action that is necessary. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.
That's this week's episode of Best in Climate for Earth Feels.
Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me.